All right, you guys, tonight we're going to be going over subtracting positive and negative integers or numbers. It is a simple step process. There are two steps. The first step is to change the problem to an addition problem. And the second step is to change the sign of the second number. Again, you change the problem to an addition problem and you change the sign of the second number. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. If you have the problem 3 minus 7, and we look back at the steps, and we have the first step is change the problem to an addition problem. So I'm going to rewrite the problem 3 plus, that's our addition problem. Second step is to change the sign of the second number. Well, this is 3 minus 7, or you could say positive 3 minus positive 7. So to change the sign of the second number, you're going to make that positive 7 a negative 7. So now our problem is 3 plus negative 7. Now we have to go back to our rules of adding integers. So if we look at our rules of adding integers, there's two real options. We have adding a negative with another negative, or adding a positive with a negative. So if we look at our problem here, we're adding, once we get to this step right here, we're adding a positive with a negative number. So if we look at the rule, it says subtract and the answer will take the sign of the larger number. So if we go to subtract, we're going to subtract the smaller from the larger. So 7 minus 3 is going to give us 4. Now, the second step, or the second part of this step, says the answer will take the sign of the larger number. Well, when we look at the problem, the larger number is 7. And 7 in the problem has a negative number, and so our answer is going to be negative. So 3 minus 7 is going to give you negative 4. And that makes sense. If we think about a number line, looking at the same problem, you have 3 minus 7 with a number line, starting at 0, going out to 3, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. If you start at positive 3 and you take away 7, you're going to go in the negative direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you end at negative 4, which is what we got with our other method. Now let's look at another problem. Let's say that we had negative 12 minus negative 7. I'm going to put parentheses around this just to make it less confusing with subtracting a negative. But we go back to our rules. The two simple steps are change the problem to addition and change the sign of the second number. So I'm going to do that right now. Let's change the color. I'm going to say negative 12 plus now positive 7. And I look over at my rules for adding integers, and I'm looking at a positive being added with a negative. So the rule says subtract the answer, subtract, and the answer will take the sign of the larger number. So we go back and we say, okay, well, let's subtract 12 minus 7. 12 minus 7 is going to give me 5. The larger number here is the 12, and the 12 is the negative, so our answer is going to be negative 5. Okay, let's try another problem now. Let's try negative 6 minus 14. Negative 6 minus 14. So I go back to my notes, and I look to the two simple steps are change the problem to addition and change the sign of the second number. So I'm going to change the problem to addition, negative 6 plus, and I'm going to change the sign of the second number. Now, the problem itself is really saying negative 6 minus positive 14. So I'm going to change that positive 14 into a negative 14. So I'm changing the sign of the second number. I changed it to addition, changed the sign of the second number. Now, if I look over at my rules for adding, I see that a negative, when I'm adding a negative with a negative, I add the absolute values of the numbers, and the answer will be negative. So when I'm adding the absolute value of negative 6 is 6. Then I add the absolute value of negative 14, which is 14. 6 plus 14 is going to give me 20. And then the note says, and the answer will be negative. So my answer to this problem is going to be negative 20. Now the real key to solving these problems is following the notes. Okay, understanding and following the notes. So I want you to get a piece of paper, take a second, pause the video, and write these 2 simple steps down. We're going to do some practice problems, and I want you to write these down so that you have them to look at while you're trying the practice problem. So please pause the recording and write these steps down. Next, I want you to write these steps down, or if you can find your notes that have them on them already, you can use those. But I want this on a piece of paper so that you can look at it as you're trying the practice problem. So go ahead and pause this recording and write these 2 rules for adding negative numbers down. All right, now let's practice this. So I want you guys on a piece of paper to try this problem. Let's go with negative 13 minus positive 7. Go ahead and pause the recording and solve this problem on your own. Okay, before I tell you the answer, let's look at your work. So the first step when we're subtracting is to change the problem to an addition problem. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's change it to negative 13 plus, and then the second part was to change the sign of the second number. So we have negative 13 minus 7 in the problem. Minus positive 7. So we're going to change it to negative 13 plus negative 7. This has an implied positive sign next to it. And so changing the sign is going to make it a negative 7. Now when we look at the rules for adding 2 negative numbers, we add their absolute values. The absolute value of 13 is, or negative 13 is 13, plus the absolute value of negative 7 is 7. 13 plus 7 is going to give me 20, and when I look at my rules for adding 2 negatives, the answer will be negative. So my answer is going to be negative 20. All right, let's try one more problem. Let's try 26 minus negative 13. 26 minus negative 13. Go ahead and pause the recording and solve this problem, looking at your notes to guide you. Okay, and again, before I tell you the answer, let's look at your work. So the first step is to change it to an addition problem. 26 plus, and to change the sign of the second number, positive 13. Now we're back to adding positives like you guys learned how to do in kindergarten. So you've got 26 plus 13 is going to give you 39. So positive 39 is your answer. Again, the easiest way to solve these is by memorizing and looking at your notes. So just to review, the 2 simple steps for subtracting integers is change the problem to addition and change the sign of the second number. Then you have to remember the rules for adding negative numbers, which are negative numbers added with negative numbers. You add their absolute values, and then the answer is going to be negative. Positive with negative numbers, you're going to subtract or find the difference, and the answer will take the sign of the larger number. Hopefully that made sense to you guys, and hopefully you guys can add and subtract integers.